we say? Good evening, everyone. If you could please take your seats. I just want to briefly welcome everyone to the town meeting for the 21-22 fiscal year. Town budget is wonderful to see everybody out. I'm so happy that people are feeling comfortable coming into the middle school this evening to be with us tonight. And I have to laugh that there's more people here on the aftermath of a pandemic than typically we ever see. So that must mean that people are really feeling good about getting out, and it's wonderful to see all of you. I'd like to invite the town clerk up here to get us started.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I just want to go over our few typical housekeeping notes. First of all, please make sure you silence any of your cell phones at this point. And as our first selectman said, we are live streaming this, so we welcome the folks at home to watch along as we enter into this budget meeting. Anybody who is going to speak into the microphone tonight, please identify yourself and note your street address as well. My two assistant town clerks, Erica Bauscher and Michelle Urch, have microphones. If there's any questions, we'll be happy to get them to you. We do have wipes, so we'll wipe them between each question. So to start off the evening, I'll entertain a motion for anyone to nominate a moderator for this evening.
Yep. Chris Lambert, 22 Old Farms Lane. I motion to nominate Ed McEnany as the moderator this evening.
So we have a nomination for Edward McEnany to be the moderator this evening. Do I hear any other nominations from the floor? Hearing no other nominations, all in favor of Ed McEnany being our moderator for this evening, say aye. Anyone opposed, say nay. Ed, congratulations. I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you. Well, good evening, one and all. Please, everybody, stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you very much. Okay, I'll ask our lovely town clerk to come up and read the notice for the town meeting this evening.
These masks and fogging up doesn't work very well together. So the legal notice for the annual budget meeting for 2021-2022 for the town of Suffield. Notice is hereby given that the annual budget meeting of the inhabitants of the town of Suffield, Connecticut, qualified to vote in town meeting, will be held in the auditorium of Suffield Middle School, 350 Mountain Road, Suffield, Connecticut, on Wednesday, May 26, 2021, at 7 p.m. for the purpose to wit: 1. Consider and act upon the report and recommendations of the Board of Finance, and to make such appropriations in connection therewith that may be advisable. 2. To consider and act upon the motion authorizing the Board of Finance to print and distribute explanatory text concerning the budget if the budget is petitioned to referendum. Such text may not advocate approval or disapproval of the budget and must conform to the General Connecticut Statute, Section 9-369B. Dated at Suffield, Connecticut, this 5th day of May, 2021, Board of Selectmen, Melissa M. Mack for Selectmen, Kathleen Harrington, Selectman, Peter Hill, Selectman, Jeremiah Mahoney, Selectman, and Timothy Reynolds, Selectman. This appeared in the Journal Enquirer on May 7th, 2021.
Thank you. All right. Do I have a motion? The first motion on the call?
Yes. You sure? Sorry. Sorry. Chris Lambert, 22 Old Farms Lane. Resolved that the town meeting of the town of Suffield authorizes the proposed budget with a total expenditure of $62,325,318 be approved. Resolved that the town meeting of the town of Suffield authorizes the Board of Finance to print and distribute explanatory text concerning the budget if the budget is petitioned to referendum. Such text may not advocate approval or disapproval of the budget and must conform to the Connecticut General Statutes, Section 9-369B.
Very good, thank you. I'll take a second for the first motion, which is regarding the budget. Is there a second? Hello? There's a second. I'll take a second for the second motion, which is the explanatory texts motion. All right, we have a second. Lisa Trace has seconded it twice. So the first order of business, now that we've got that on the floor and properly before the board, or before the town meeting, is to ask the first selectman, Melissa Mack, to give a presentation.
Good evening again. Again, thank you all for joining us this evening. You may have attended many of the budget meetings, both at the Board of Selectmen level, the Board of Finance level, and last week's public hearing, which a lot of information was given on these topics. I've done a bit of an abbreviated presentation this evening, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions at the end. To start out, our department heads requested a budget of $17,383,785, which is a $1,039,035 increase, or 6.36% over last fiscal year. These were presented by each department head, and I want to thank them for really working really hard to present really reasonable budgets this year. If you remember, last year's budgets were decreased by $800,000 from the original department head request. So I'm not surprised to see that it's a little bit bigger than we would have expected at the onset. So we started with the goal of really having a minimal at all increase overall at the end of the day in the entire budget. And so we looked at what would our budget increase be if we did nothing but absorb things that were contractually bound or legally bound increases. And so I'll walk you through these quickly. Settled union contracts within the last few years, including highway, 1 year of wage increases, dispatcher union, 3 years of cumulative wage increases, town hall union, 3 years of cumulative wage increases, and library also 3 years of cumulative wage increases, resulted in an automatic increase of $116,200. Pending union contracts, including the fire union, which will expire at the end of this fiscal year, and the police union, which is in interest arbitration, and we expect to be settled by the fall. And so we added an additional $120,000 to reflect cumulative wage increases for those outstanding union contracts. This year, also has a 53-week payroll, which means our hourly employees, and this is just straight time, not including any overtime pay, we have a $93,000, which is a 0.57 automatic increase. Again, this will be a non-recurring increase just because of the 53rd week. Unfunded state mandated increases in the Connecticut minimum wage result in about a $26,000 increase, primarily in Parks and Rec, because it will impact all of the camp counselors, et cetera, and it'll have a cumulative domino effect on those positions. Then we have what I'm calling COVID accommodations, which resulted in, because of the pandemic, and we knew that some of our departments would be closed and our facilities would be closed, we phased in some of our new hires, our new positions. That included our new full-time custodian. We phased that in, and 2 positions at the Kent Memorial Library. So now, obviously, we have to fully budget for those positions. So automatically, that results in a $46,000 increase. The subtotal, $401,200. I backed out $65,000 because we always anticipate, some union contracts settling, and so we put some money into insurance and employee benefits for that occasion. And so I backed that out, and resulting in a total standing still increase over last fiscal year of $336,200, which is already a 2.06% increase. So again, we automatic increases you'll see on the left. Then there's some other increases from fiscal year 2021 of about almost $300,000, or an additional 1.82%, resulting in $634,125 total. And again, from the first slide, this is a $404,910 reduction from department requests. And I'll just give you an overview of what some of those items include. Staffing changes will include the addition of a full-time paramedic for $85,000. The contract with the Suffield Volunteer Ambulance Association will absorb the remainder of any increases on account of that new position. Building, planning, and zoning administrative support is increasing by 6 hours a week, which will be per total of just over $11,000. We're increasing our communications manager webmaster by 10 hours a week for a total, including benefits, of $42,575. Reorganization of the assessor and tax collector departments as a result of a retirement is resulting in a $17,400 decrease in those combined budgets. And we're able to do that as a result of the new town hall renovation. They are in very efficient combined space, which many of you may have seen. So that's another good outcome from that change. In addition, non-union salaries are going up by 2% for a total of $46,000. So those are the majority of the increases that you're seeing. That resulted in a $16,978,875 budget for a 3.88% increase, and that was approved by the Board of Selectmen on February 24th, 2021. So then we went through a series of meetings with the department heads, and the Board of Finance decided to increase the general government operations budget, which I'm not certain they've ever done that in the last 5 years, so I want to thank them for doing that and making some good additions. And I'll just briefly go through what those are. They reduced performance bonuses that I had put in by $10,000. I proposed $20,000 because of the extraordinary work that the department heads performed during the pandemic. They chose to take the $10,000 out of the current fiscal year's contingency, and so they just decided to fund it this year because it occurred during this fiscal year. So that really was really just an accounting change. They increased the pension contribution for our unfunded liability of an additional $120,000. They made a reduction in workers' compensation insurance due to our experience of $20,736. They increased the fire department budget due to the combined, there was a $50,692,000 shortfall once we did a deeper dive into some of the costs to maintain the stations. And then we backed out $19,461 that was additional overtime that was overestimated, and so that ended up again at a net of about $31,000 and change. Then we made some additional changes with respect to trash hauling and burning fees. For any of you who follow Mira in Hartford, it is on the verge of bankruptcy, and as a result, after the Board of Selectmen had already approved the budget, we found out that our per ton tip fee was going to be $102 per ton versus our estimate, which was in the 90s. And so we made a $55,000 adjustment upward to account for that shortfall. So the total at the end of all of those adjustments ended up at $17,154,370, or an increase of $175,495 from what the Board of Selectmen had proposed, and a total 4.95% increase. And so at the end of the day, I'm happy to answer any questions. I do want to point out a few items that are non-recurring again. That the town charter revision will be complete in this current budget. We have $15,000 in that for there. I want to remind you again of the 53-week payroll, which is $93,000, and then the $120,000 extra pension contribution. These are non-recurring items that add to $228,000 or 1.39%. And so while you'll see a 4.95% increase, 1.39 of that is not recurring. Again, I'm happy to answer questions. I believe at the end, after the Board of Ed does their presentation, I would invite Superintendent Van Tassel and his team up here. Okay, we're going to make a few changes. And I also want to thank the Board of Ed for the work that they did. This was a very difficult year. They came in with a 0% increase to help support our taxpayers. And on behalf of the taxpayers, I want to thank them for that. And of course, the Board of Finance also for their hard work. They had a lot of meetings and they put a lot of really good thought into where we are today. All right. Let me take my pile.
Thank you, First Selectwoman Mack, and I do want to welcome everybody here this evening, and thank you for being here. My name is Tim Van Tassel, your Superintendent of Schools. It has been a true honor and a pleasure to be here for the past 2 years. At the beginning of most of our Zoom conference calls that we have with parents, we always have what was being referred to as the Emmys, where we give lots of thank yous. So our parents decided to stop logging in until about 10 minutes after the meetings began, until the Emmys were over with. But I do want to begin this evening. I'm not going to give the formal presentation of the Board of Education budget. Our Board Chair Davis is actually going to do that. But I do want to thank everybody for being here. And I do want to give special recognition to the Board of Education for their work. This has been a very lengthy process. The budget process really begins once the budget is approved by the town. So we begin that next fiscal year planning, and it's a process of several months, of which we look to bring a budget to the board by December as a proposal, and then give them the next 3 months to really deliberate on that together, to really go through everything that we have in there and ask us for the justifications for those, as well as make determinations of programming. I also would like to thank the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, who have worked very closely with us, as well as the municipal leadership. I do believe that successful towns are ones that work together in partnerships. I've always viewed a Board of Education budget really as part of a bigger picture, and that being both a part of the municipality, but also with Board of Ed. And I do recognize, with 56.7% of the town budget being the Board of Education budget, that it's important for us to look at the big picture as it relates to all of that. So that being said, we do have our presentation this evening. I do want to just begin with really a very small caption here, and that is that our budget that you're going to see this evening represents a 0% increase for the upcoming year. But I don't want that in any way to deceive the community. Our proposal, the original proposal that I came to the board with, was 2.75%. We work together, and there's been a lot of turnover and change that happens when we plan so far in advance. There are things that are in constant flux, constant change, and we're continuing to address that as we're developing the budget. Ultimately, the board adopted a 1.36 budget, of which we did bring forward to the town. But over the past several months, as many of you have been made aware, we have received a significant amount of federal funding, which has enabled us to reduce the budget proposal to 0. So with that being said, I don't want this to come across that the budget in itself is inadequate. It's not meeting the needs of our school district. I will certainly share with you that what we have here this evening represents really the needs and the expectations of our students, our programming, the families, the community of Suffield, and it will certainly support a school district that will maintain its viability and support the attractiveness that Suffield has as a community. So without further ado, I will now turn the mic over to our chair, Sue Davis. Do you want me to do this, or do you want to do
I'll just push it, I suppose. All right. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Sue Davis, and I'm the board chair for the Suffield Public Schools. I would like to thank, again, a thank you, but really it's for all of you, the community members present here today, to hear the budget presentations both in person here as well as remotely. We are proud as a Board of Education to be able to present the 2021-2022 Board of Education budget to the town for possible approval tonight via the town vote. If you may, just hold your questions to the end, as First Selectman Mack said, and we'll be sure to answer them to the best of our ability. Okay. I'm just going to do a little caveat because it is important to note that the Board of Education approved the Suffield Public School budget of, which is different than this slide, $36,389,276 in March, which was an increase of approximately $488,000 or 1.36% over last year's budget. As you can see, this slide, even though the numbers are slightly different, and I'll explain, and Tim did talk about this, is a visual perspective that salaries make up approximately 66% of this budget, and salaries with benefits make up approximately 84% of the BOE budget. However, due to COVID-19, the district received many relief funds and grants that were awarded both from the state and from the federal government. Knowing that this has been a very difficult year for many of our community members and wanting to minimize any potential increase in mill rate to the public, the board came to the Board of Finance with the proposal of utilizing some of the monies that we have received to be able to come in at a 0% increase over last year's budget. Through, I believe, great collaboration and conversation with First Selectwoman Melissa Mack, Ryan Anderson, and the entire Board of Finance, we are proud as a Board of Education to present the 2021-2022 BOE budget to the community as $35,901,022, which represents a 0% increase over last year's budget. So to talk a little bit about our personnel impacts, as you all know, that impacts a quite significant portion of our budget, we first want to talk about proposed personnel reductions. The Board of Education approved moving the athletic director position to an administrative position, which has many benefits to doing so and very little financial impact to the overall budget. With this shift, there will be a reduction of a 0.2 PE teacher, FTE, and a 0.8 FTE non-administrator athletic director. That makes up one person. This salary increase for the new administrative position is anticipated to only be $9,000, but the position itself will provide oversight, accountability, and growth in the area of not only athletics within Suffield Public Schools, but also in all student activities K through 12. And that's very important for the community and the school district as a whole. We have recently hired a new assistant principal at McAllister Intermediate School and a special education supervisor for McAllister Intermediate School and Spalding Elementary School. When we hired these two new essential employees, administrators, we restructured those contracts to be 210-day work years for both of those positions, which ultimately is a salary savings cost to the district for both of these positions. We have eliminated the English language learning teacher and that position, and we have reassigned those responsibilities of the ELA students to our or English learning language, students to our ELA interventionists and our academic supports, which is a cost saving, again, to our overall budget. We have also reduced our secretarial staff by 1.5 FTEs. We have eliminated one full-time secretary at the high school due to attrition, and we have decreased a 0.5 secretary at McAllister School to right-size the positions and be consistent between all of the schools in that position. We will continue to be thoughtful and purposeful in evaluating our resources in these positions as we move forward in the upcoming years. Finally, as you can see here, actually we have two more, but we have reduced 6.6 paraprofessionals for next year's. While that may seem high, this was based on student need, and it was determined that at this time there does not appear to be a need based on student demand. However, what I do want to kind of highlight here is that these positions are fluid. They are always changing based on student need, on change in potentially diagnosis and efforts and work for the students. So again, if that student may need more enhanced support, we may have to add a paraprofessional at any point in time throughout the year. So again, these are determined by a legally binding IEP. which is a legal document that supports the students with special needs, and those services must be provided by Suffield Public Schools. And finally, we have reduced a 0.8 hall monitor at the high school. It was decided that we did not need that. So, although we have had a net effect of 9.5 FTE reductions in this budget, there are also two proposed personnel increases. The first is that 1.0 Director of Athletics and Student Activities. The advantage of this addition, I noted in the previous slide, so I won't repeat that. There is also an addition of a 0.38 FTE for a part-time cleaner, which will account for approximately 15 hours per week. This 0.38 FTE will be paid by the ESSER grant, so in all reality, it's not truly in the budget, but we wanted to notify everybody of that FTE. With this increase in hours, it will allow us to increase custodial staff at that high school, which is our biggest facility or our biggest school, which is necessary to keep up with the cleanings of the facility. And more importantly, it will decrease the need for overtime wages, which, as I'm sure you all know, is costly or has been proven to be costly over the years. While not additions, it is important to note that 2 STEM elementary classroom teachers and 0.68 FTE instructional coaches' salaries have been moved from open choice and Title II to the BOE operating budget due to reduced funding, and this was at the Board of Finance request. What we are trying to do is be transparent about these expenses and moving some of these positions out of grant funding and back into the BOE budget in order to prepare for the reduction of grant monies coming in to the district in the future. Okay, and this is completely separate than the ESSER or the COVID relief funds that we have used to reduce the budget down to zero. Another important point to address is what is in red. I did allude to this earlier, but what we did, and this was in collaboration and communication with the Board of Finance, is that due to the COVID-19 and many of the grants received from the government, the district did move 8.42 FTEs to the ESSER grant in order to provide some relief to taxpayers and to reduce the budget down to this 0%. But what I do want to say, this also allows the Suffield Public Schools to provide quality services to our children, and while maintaining a fiscal responsibility to our community members during this difficult time of COVID-19. So this slide basically will talk about some areas for potential additional savings and potential liabilities. As Dr. Van Tassel spoke, it is very hard to talk or to plan a budget so far in advance, and so sometimes, we'll be seeing some liabilities or savings come in, and we want to be sure that we're communicative to the Board of Finance as well as to the community as a whole. Health insurance has come in or is projected to come in at 10%. Open enrollment for health insurance savings is variable and difficult to predict and or estimate. However, again, we have made a promise, and this is what we have done for years, to always update the Board of Finance once we know whether we will have an increase or a decrease in healthcare enrollment in order to maintain transparency with our budget in this regard. Another area for increased savings is through our negotiations with our unions. We are always actively engaging in conversation with our unions during negotiations in order to try to find creative ways in which to potentially reduce healthcare costs and prescription costs, as those are really a large amount of costs in that arena. And so if we can be a little more creative with them and add some savings in there, we do try to do that through our negotiations. Well, where there are savings, there are always areas for potential additional liabilities. First, faculty and staff turnover can be kind of both. It can be a savings or it can be a liability depending on retirements. To date, We have had a few notifications of retirements. They will come in more and more as the school year is coming to a close. But when we do have a retirement, it is important for the public to understand that we are always looking at staff numbers and necessities. So do we need that staff person? Could we repurpose that position for something else or reduce it altogether? If we decide that we have to rehire that position, which also happens, we usually always try to rehire the position at a lesser salary, and that's for obvious reasons, right? As a teacher leaves, they're often at the higher pay scale, and as we bring someone in, they will be a newer hire, a younger teacher, and obviously then have a less of a salary. We are currently in negotiations with our Teamsters union, the Teamster Local 671 CBA group. I will say those negotiations have been cordial and cooperative. We are hopeful for a very fair contract settlement. And then what you will see here, I apologize for being a little out of place here, but the last one that I'm going to talk about is special education outplacements. There is always a concern regarding outplacements for our special needs students who are our most extensive students can be extremely or are extremely expensive. Our current administration, I would like to thank because they have made significant gains with parental communication and relationships, which always lessens the risk for an adversarial relationship when a parent is trying to advocate for their child and the school is trying to do the same. And so there's always that, if we have a better relationship, hopefully a decreased risk for a unilateral outplacement. However, what I do want to make note of is that there is always a chance that Suffield Public Schools just cannot provide services for a child with extensive needs for whatever reason. And the district will always work for what's in the best interest of that child. And if they do have to outplace that child, that does come at the cost to the district. And as I said, those are extremely expensive. So I also tried to decrease this a little bit. But as I said in the beginning of the presentation, the Board of Education, Dr. Van Tassel, central office, and our school building administration has worked very hard to present a Board of Education budget that not only serves our students, our faculty, and our staff well, while maintaining a level of high educational standards within Suffield Public Schools, but we were also steadfast in our desire to keep our budget fiscally responsible, especially in these trying times, financial times for many of our Suffield families as we emerge from COVID-19. And I say that with a lot of hope that we are emerging from the pandemic. So to that end, on behalf of the Board of Education, we are presenting to the town of Suffield an education budget of $35,901,022, or a 0% increase over the 2020-2021 Board of Education budget. So thank you. I don't know what it'll do. Oh, there we go. Look at that.
That's great. Thank you very much to the Board of Education Chairwoman, Susan Davis. So we'll start in as we've done before. We'll take questions first and then comments, and we'll get the appropriate individual up here to address those questions or comments. And we'll see how this plays out, but for the moment we'll ask one at a time if we could, and give everybody an opportunity to ask any questions. And we have the two assistant town clerks with microphones so they can go around if you have a question so we can all hear it. Please identify yourself by name and address, and we'll go from there. Do I have any questions addressed to I think I have a question back here, to the town budget.
Thank you. Mel Chaffetz, 803 Mapleton Ave. First, I just wanted to extend a thank you to the Board of Ed and to the town, to all the employees. This has been an extremely difficult, stressful year, and I think they really deserve a hand from all of us for everything that they've had to put up with. It's been hard just as a citizen, so I can imagine working in the schools and working in town. That's been difficult. So thank you. I do have a question. I don't know, is Ryan Anderson here?
He's not.
He's not. I'm going to pick on Tracy Eccles then, if I could. I have some questions. I wanted to get some thinking from the Board of Finance. And since I know you've been on the board for a long time, and my question, or my statement is, I noticed over the last few years that the first selectman's office, when she was first elected, we had a .10 in the secretarial position, and she split that to share it, which made a lot of sense. But now that position's a 2.0. I also noticed that in the HR, the town has gone from a 1.0 to a 2.0. And the town has 80 to 100 employees, I'm guessing, while the schools don't have an HR director, and they have 400 employees and probably the same number of unions. I know that the police, 2 or 3 years ago, we did a town spent $30,000 to $40,000 to do a study of the police department, and they recommended that we add a second captain, and that's been presented every year, and the Board of Finance has turned that down. I know that the fire department's asked for help. The library's asked for additional help. We've reduced the Department of Public Works from 2 full-time positions to 1. We've reduced other town offices. The highway department's really depleted. So I guess I'm asking, what's the thinking behind this?
Well, I think the first order of business is the question is probably more correctly directed towards the first selectman.
No,
Because
I'd really like the finance, because they're the ones that make the decision. They're the ones that, I mean, the first selectman has presented some of these things to them, and they're the ones that turn it down. That's why I wanted to have somebody from the Board of Finance.
Well, I'm not sure you're going to get anywhere just by picking on Tracy, because she's only one of a member of the board.
I mean,
Do you want to address that, Tracy?
Sorry.
No, I would say that it's not the numbers, it's the quality of people who run a department. And so I think the first selectman has done a great job bringing in just a great, capable managers for the different groups. In terms of the HR, we've been very impressed with our HR director. And our HR director helps so many departments. And even, I believe, helps the school in their HR initiatives, and has been the reason why we're able to negotiate on so many of these union contracts. As you remember, a few years ago, we had these outstanding union contracts for years, and they were causing quite a lot of problems with the budget, because once they were negotiated, our budget then went up by 2 to 3% in order to pay back pay. So our HR director is really looking at all the benefits and making sure that they're equitable from department to department. And that's the first time we've ever done that. So we're really looking at defined benefits, looking at the health plans, looking at all the types of entitlements that we offer to our employees. So as I said, we've been very pleased with our HR department, and it was long overdue. In terms of administrative support, we've been doing, we have taken the suggestion of our first select woman on additional help with the administrative work, because it's necessary. Just like the schools, lots of calls come in, there's a lot of communication needs, and the citizens want better communication. So we provided that in the budget. Tell me again what your other questions were. There were quite a lot of them.
The police department?
The police department, there's been open positions in the police department.
Right, but those are patrolmen.
There have been open positions. They have not been filled, and we're going through. There's been a lot of management changes at the police department over the last few years, and I think there will be more probably in the future. And so until we see those open positions filled and we have a full force, we're not going to add a lot more money. It's one of our second largest expenses for the town. It's a big police department, and we have supported them. We've given them, as you know, just gave them the patrol cars. We've just given them new equipment that they're funding for wearing when people are stopped. So we have been funding them. It's as I said, a big expense for this town. As I said, very second largest expenditure. In terms of public works, that team has done a great job bringing. I believe the first selectman has just hired someone new in that group. We've had some turnover, some retirements. Again, I want to reiterate. Oftentimes, it's not the number of people, but it's the caliber of people coming in. And we've been, as I said, impressed by the caliber of people we've been able to hire. It's been wonderful for the town of Suffield to get some top people in, and I think we're seeing a big difference on the Board of Finance.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Excuse me, Tom Frenet, 489 Warnertown Road. And I had a question. I see in the Board of Ed budget, there's a line that describes the legal expenses the board expects to have in the next year and what they've had the last couple of years. But in the town budget, I didn't see anything that separated out the legal expenses. And is it just that I missed it, or is it really not a separated item in any of the detail that's provided?
Want to answer that?
Let's see here. It's usually separated out.
Yeah, it usually is.
Page 9. Page 9 at the bottom. Want me to talk?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Page 9 at the bottom, you'll see town council. And the budget for 2021 was $100,000, and the fiscal year 21-22 is reduced to $93,000. So we are anticipating a bit of a reduction, and that includes both general town council matters and union negotiations, so labor council as well. We just settled several union contracts. We expect the police union arbitration to be completed, and we will be negotiating the WPCA union and the fire union. And a model that we've started doing is, now that we've gone through one iteration with all of those union contracts, is that we prepare kind of some standard proposals. HR and I and the department head, with in consultation with the commission, will go in and do the negotiations using counsel at the end when we have questions that are related to MIRA, which is the body of law that applies to municipal employees, and to be the scrivener of the contract to make sure that we're appropriately documenting things. So we have a kind of a much more cost-effective process now that we've gone through and cleaned up some of the really difficult issues with these contracts.
Okay, thank you. I missed that when I went through there a couple of times. One related question, are all the legal expenses in that line, or are they also sometimes distributed to other departments?
That's a good question. One department that comes to mind is planning and zoning. Has always had their own budget because they use a separate council that has expertise in planning and zoning law. And in fact, this year, their budget is slightly higher because we have a couple of pending cases that are currently being heard. And so we added a little bit to be conservative there. I'm trying to think if there are any other areas. Most every other area runs through the town council budget.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a question on another subject, but I'll let somebody else go first.
So do we have any other questions before we go back to Tom Frenet? Go ahead, Tom.
Last question I have is, the Board of Ed spoke about some monies that had come in to offset COVID expenses, and it wasn't obvious to me in my quick look through here if the town has received monies, and I know that there is a considerable amount that's been promised to the town on the order of a couple of $1 million that is apparently not in the budget, because I heard the Board of Finance speak to that, and that once you get guidance on how you can use the money that comes from the state or the federal government to offset COVID expenses, I believe the Board of Finance's intent is to come back to the town and propose how to use that money. I wonder if you could explain that in a little more detail.
Yes, we had some expenses that we've incurred along the way over the last year. We've submitted those, we've been reimbursed. An example is some of the overtime for the appropriate schedule for the fire department, for instance, to make sure that, social distancing, they were working separately. And so we were reimbursed for some of those expenses. Now there's some additional funding that's coming in, and we are going to be having a tri-board meeting on June 14th at the Board of Finance regular meeting with the Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, and Board of Finance to continue discussing this. We have been waiting for guidance, which has been very slow, to come from the state and the federal government on how we can use these funds. A lot of the obvious uses are not really applicable in Suffield, which I'm very grateful for, that we haven't had some of the impacts that some of the cities, our counterparts in cities have had. So did you want to add something, Tim?
Thank you, Tom, for that question. I just want to give just a quick update. So we've received really 3 rounds of funding. The first set had come in prior to the beginning of this past school year, and we utilized that COVID relief funding for the purposes of really preparing for the school year. We had some additional faculty that we needed to hire, some additional staffing in the nurses' offices, as well as a pretty significant amount was spent on PPE, personal protective equipment for our faculty and staff, as well as even for our students, and then some additional programming initiatives that we had put in. And then we received that second round, which was the ESSER 2 funds, which is the elementary and secondary, oh goodness, it's coming to emergency relief funds. So we ended up receiving that second round. What we've done is we've developed really a plan of those, and we've come to the board, we've come to our finance subcommittee and kind of shared what perspective was with a lot of that. And both of those funds, we were dealing with the supplement, not supplant matter. Where the first initial round of funding that we received was a supplement, not supplant, which meant that we couldn't utilize that funding to offset already projected expenses for the budget. So it was really for the additional pieces. But then we've received the ESSER funds, which are not supplement, not supplant. So there's less restriction relative to those. So we have been in communication with the Board of Education on the utilization of the ESSER 2, and a lot of it's being used for the things that are happening in the moment. Within about 3 months ago, we received communication from the state regarding the American Rescue Plan, and that's the ESSER 3 funds. I do invite everybody here. There will be a meeting next Tuesday evening for the Board of Education so that they can actually hear some of the proposals. And at this point in time, they're only proposals. We have not actually received those funds yet. And if I'm correct, I believe it's about $1.38 million that we're anticipating getting from those American Rescue Funds. But as First Selectman Rack had noted, there will be a tri-board meeting on the 14th. But what we would like to do is at least this upcoming Monday or this upcoming Tuesday evening, have an opportunity to go over what some of the initial thoughts are relative to those funds, but keeping in mind that there has to be a greater conversation with the Board of Finance, with the town leadership, with the Board of Selectmen, and really how best to appropriate and utilize those funds. So we have not earmarked those dollars. Obviously, we have some thoughts, but we really need to get a sense of really what are the needs of the community going to be. Fortunately, those funds themselves, they are not supplement, not supplant, so they can be used to offset budget expenses. What we did do, and this was kind of at the request of the Board of Finance, and I know with the Board of Ed as well, is to really take a multi-year look. And these revenues that we're about to get did give us the opportunity to give some projections, once again, very preliminary, but give some projections as to what we might be able to do for the fiscal year 23 budget. So we had actually given some thought process of if we utilize some of these funds, how might it be able to drop next year's proposal, which we may be hitting some sort of a fiscal cliff. So we're trying to give that advanced look. So whatever we utilize these funds for, maybe it's going to be able to help the town out further down the road. There are some provisions. The State Department of Education is requiring that these funds be used for within school districts, but once again, we can use those funds to offset budgetary expenses, which by then would enable us to reduce the budget. So, everything is really, in this point in time, it's just planning that we're in for the American Rescue Plan. But I encourage anybody who wants this upcoming Tuesday evening's meeting will be done via Zoom. So if anybody's interested in hearing that, one of the things that we are required to do for this, albeit it really it's counterintuitive in Connecticut, where our schools have been open since the beginning of the school year. Because this is a federal fund, a lot of states have struggled with reopening schools. And as part of that, they are requiring that in order to receive the town's allocation of the American Rescue Plan funds, we have to, the school district is obligated to, not the town, solicit stakeholder feedback on a reopening plan for the Suffield Public Schools. So I have spent the past week working to really revise our reopening plan that we put in place last year, and have that prepared to share with the board this upcoming Tuesday evening, as well as solicit some feedback from the community relative to that plan so that we can secure those funds. So, I thank you for your question, and if there's anything else that I could follow up with you on that relative to the Board of Ed, you can always reach out to me. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions? We'll move on to comments. If anybody cares to comment, please make them brief. I'm not going to impose a time limit. Is there anybody who cares to comment on the budget? I don't see any. Going once, going twice. Any comments? Nope. Very good. Then I'll call for a vote on the budget. We'll do that resolution first. It's already been made and seconded. And then we'll go on to the explanatory texts. All those in favor of the budget as proposed, say aye. Anyone opposed? The ayes have it. It's unanimous. Now on the issue of the explanatory text, all those who are in favor of the printing of the explanatory text, if the budget is petitioned to a referendum, signify by saying aye. Anyone opposed? Excuse me. Well, that was good. So now I'll take a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn? There we go. Second. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Have a good evening. All done. Who knows whose mask it is? I got my shot. I'm good.